Shalom everyone, hope everyone's doing well. Be'ezrat Hashem, in Masechet Sanhedrin, we're going to learn today the bottom of Chaf Aleph Amud Aleph and the top of Chaf Aleph Amud Bet. We're going to have one section in today's learning which will discuss further stories that happened in Malchut Beit Dovid with his children. Some of these stories are actually very unpleasant. We'll see, David had a lot of, you could call strange stories occur within his family, rebellions included. And we'll begin at Omer of Yehuda Amar Rav, which is about 15 or 20 lines from the bottom of Chaf Aleph Amud Aleph. Be'ezrat Hashem, our learning today should be a zechut, a merit for a refuah shleima, complete and full recovery for Yaakov ben Dinah, and we should hear Besarot Tovot. So let's get started. Omer of Yehuda Amar Rav. Rav Yehuda Amar Rav teaches, the beginning of the line, about 15 lines from the bottom of the page. Omer of Yehuda Amar Rav, says Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, Arba meyot yeladim hayu lo le David. David had 400 children. V'kulan b'nei yifat toar hayu, and they were all children of yifat toar. Yifat toar literally means a woman of beautiful form. There's a section in the Torah that discusses how when the Jewish soldiers used to go out to battle, the goyim, the way they used to try to distract the Jewish soldiers was by putting beautiful women out in the battlefront. And the Torah talks about, the Rishonim explain, that since men would lust after these women regardless, and this concept I'm about to say is a very difficult concept, but we'll just learn at face value. The Torah permitted a Jewish soldier to take these women, and there's a procedure that needs to be undergone, but actually as a wife, machloket in the Rishonim, if you could have relations with her there on the battlefield or not, because either way he would end up taking those women. Now this is a very unique chidush. But the Gemara tells us that David HaMelech had 400 children born from these women. Umegadle bloriot hayu, and these children, they grew their hair out, which was not like the Jewish way. They grew out like a pony in the back, like they had a long extension of hair, like the goyim used to have. The kulan yoshvin bekronot shel zahav, they all sat in golden chariots. Umealchin brashe gayesot hayu, and they would go in front of the troops, the armies of David. They were like the fists, the powerful warriors of David that led the battle cry. Tamar, there's a Tamar. Now Tamar is listed twice, at least in Tanakh. First episode is a Tamar who was also actually interesting. Both of them are in what you could call strange circumstances. The daughter-in-law of Yehuda, he ends up sleeping with her. We're not going to get to that now. And the second incident is in Shmuel, Sefer Shmuel, which is Tamar is seemingly a daughter of David, but from a different wife. And David has another son whose, Tamar's mother was Ma'acha, actually, we listed it before. She was the full sister of Avshalom, who was also a famous character rebelling against his father David. But David had another son, Amnon, from a different mother, which would make Amnon and Tamar as half-siblings, theoretically. And there's an episode in Shmuel where this Amnon lusts after his seemingly half-sister Tamar. He wants to have relations with her so much that it makes him sickly. So his cousin, we're going to learn about momentarily, named Yonadav, who was an intelligent person, but we'll see he used his intelligence in the wrong way, gave him advice how to orchestrate a situation where he pretended he was sick. He needed his half-sister Tamar to make him food. She would come into his private chamber. He would be able to abuse her, have relations with her. And that's the episode we're about to talk about now. So Rav Yehuda Amar Rav said, Tamar bat yifat toar haita. This Tamar was the daughter of Ma'acha, but she was actually the daughter of Ma'acha who was yifat toar, meaning she was a daughter born of a mother who David had taken from battle amongst the goyim. Shene'amar, like the pasuk says, that when this Amnon takes this Tamar to violate her, Tamar pleads to Amnon, don't violate me. Instead, ask David HaMelech, our father, to just have my hand in marriage, and then it would be permissible and not in such a disgraceful way. She says, Ve'ata daber na'el HaMelech, speak now to the king, ki lo yimna'eni mimecha, because he won't withhold me from you. Meaning she says is, don't violate me in this way, and instead ask David, and he'll allow you to marry me. And if it would enter your mind that she was somebody who was fitting for nisuin, if you thought that it would have been a fitting nisuin. Would his sister have been permitted to him? Meaning to say is, if she was born of a regular marriage between David and the mother Ma'acha, obviously she wouldn't have been permitted, and David wouldn't have allowed Amnon to marry her, because it's his full Jewish sister, at least in that way. So it must be it must be bat yifat toar haita. Now it comes out like this: it must be she was born of the relations that David had with Ma'acha before Ma'acha had become Jewish, which is it's a debate in the Rishonim actually. And this Gemara sides more like Rabbeinu Tam, which would imply when David had relations with Ma'acha, Ma'acha wasn't yet Jewish. And the byproduct of that is therefore not attributable directly to David, in which case this is not a full sister of Amnon. Actually, he's not considered related really. And therefore David would have allowed Amnon to marry Tamar. Now nonetheless, Amnon went and raped her, and therefore he didn't have that option anyways. The Gemara tells us that when Amnon was lusting after her, he was so desperate to have relations with her. Pasuk says, Ula Amnon Reya, Amnon had a friend, Ushmo Yonadav, who was called Yonadav ben Shim'a, Achi David, Yonadav was the son of Shim'a, was the brother of David. So this Yonadav was actually Amnon's cousin. And he was Ish Chacham v'Gomer. He was a very wise person. So Amar Rav Yehuda Marav, Ish Chacham l'Rish'a. He was actually a wise person for negativity, for wickedness. Meaning he used his Chokhmah to give advice to Amnon to how to orchestrate a plot that he could abuse this Tamar. Vayomer, and this Yonadav said to Amnon, Madua takacha dal ben Amelech, why do you look so weak and so gaunt? Vayomer lo Yonadav, so Yonadav said, based on the story you're telling me, Shechava mishkavcha ve'itchal ve'gomer. So lie in your bed, pretend that you're sick, and va'ad va'asta le'enai et habiriya, and you'll say, I need someone to come in and make me food. You'll insist that it has to be your sister, really not half sister, Tamar, and then she'll come in. And that's what happened. She took the frying pan, this Tamar, and she prepared the food in front of him. She made him fried food, which is only enjoyable immediately from the frying pan, and that was part of his argument why this was necessary, putting her in a situation that he could abuse her. The Psukim say, after he violates her, that he hates Tamar so much, even more than how he lusted after her before. So the Gemara says, my time, why was it that he hated her so much after violating her? So the Gemara says he got what was coming to him. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, Nima nikshara lo. What happened was her pubic hairs had been tied, or there was a knot in them of some sort, and it damaged his male member to the degree that he became balmum. It damaged his, almost like it cut off his male member, or it damaged it in a significant way. So the Gemara says, but if it was tied for her, what has she done? Meaning it wasn't her fault, so why did he hate her? Apparently, somehow, she was able to cause her pubic hairs to be tied in a way to prevent the violation, but it didn't prevent it, and therefore what ended up happening was he became damaged in this process, and that's why he ended up hating her after the violation, because of the damage that it caused him. Eini, says the Gemara, is this possibly true? Darash Rav, but Rav expounded that the verse in Yecheskel teaches us, what does it mean when it says in Yecheskel, it says about the Jewish girls, a name has gone out amongst the Goyim about your beauty. What does it teach us? She'ein lahen lebnot Yisrael lo sa'ar beit ha'shechi velo beit ha'erva, that the Jewish girls, at least in Bayit Rishon, were blessed in a certain way. They did not have armpit hair or pubic hair. So asks the Gemara, it seems to be, and this was like a beautiful mark. So the Gemara says, l'chaura, how could it be that he was damaged by her pubic hair if it sounds like they didn't have that? So the Gemara answers, no, based on what we said before, it's not a kasha. Shani Tamar debat yifat toar avai. Tamar was the daughter of Yifat Toar, means she was born from a conception that occurred before her mother had converted, and therefore she didn't have that blessing like other Jewish girls. Now the Pasuk tells us that after she was violated, Vatikach, by the way, on this note, just to point out, Avshalom was her full brother, and the Psukim tell us Avshalom eventually arranged that this Amnon would be killed because of what he did to his sister. Now the Pasuk says, Vatikach Tamar efar rosha, she was violated and she put ashes on her head, and she V'ktonet hapasim asher aleha kar'ah, and she tore the royal garment that she used to wear. So Tana Mishmeid Reb Yeshua ben Karcha, Geder Gadol Gadra Tamar Ba'ota Sha'a. At that time, the Jewish women took a great lesson from this Tamar, and they made a certain fencing or prevention for themselves. Why? Amruk, because they said the following: Libnot melachim kach, if for a daughter of the king this happens to her, libnot hedyotot alachat kama v'kama, so certainly this could happen to ordinary girls. And imetz nuot kach, if for a woman like Tamar who was a tzanua, she was a modest woman, and it ended up happening such a violation, leprutzot alachat kama v'kama. So certainly it could happen to women who are more prutzot, less modest, and therefore, as Rashi explains over here, they said we have to be more careful not to have situations like this. It created an awareness about modesty in relation to being violated. Now, the Gemara says it's not only in terms of a social sensitivity that it created such a thing, but actually there are halachic implications of this. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rabba, Tasha Agazu, the Chachamim made a decree at that time, turning to Chav Aleph Amud Bet, ala yichud ve'ala pnuya. They made a gzeira that you can't have yichud with an eshet ish, a married woman, and also with a pnuya, with a unmarried woman, because in this situation, yichud, the privacy that the Amnon and Tamar went and led to such a terrible occurrence. So they made a gzeira, not only a eshet ish, but even for pnuya, a single woman can't go into seclusion with a Jewish man. Asks the Gemara, Yichud D'oraitahu. What do you mean? Yichud is a gzeira for an eshet ish. Actually, that's D'oraita. Amar Rabbi Yochanan B'Shum Rabbi Shimon ben Yotzadak. Remez liyichud min haTorah minayin. Where do we find a reference that there's an isser of yichud with arayot, with the forbidden women? Shene'emar, like the pasuk says. Now this is talking about the parasha of a mesit. Mesit is a person who tries to convince other Jews to worship avodah zarah, and it says over there, when your brother, who is your maternal brother, will attempt to seduce you to do avodah zarah. Is it only your maternal brother that could attempt to do this and not your father's, your paternal brother? What is it to tell you? That a son is allowed to be in seclusion with his mother, as opposed to all the other forbidden relationships, you're not allowed to have seclusion with them. And that's the idea, which is naturally maternal brothers would be together often because a child couldn't be in yichud with his mother, and that's where you could have a situation of a mesit, of somebody who tries to convince others to do avodah zarah. But the point that we see from that is that the implication is you're not allowed to be in yichud, in seclusion, with all the other arayot, including eshet ish. So how can you say that was the gzeira? Ela emas, or rather, what was the gzeira? Gazru al yichud de pnuya. It's true. The issue of yichud, of other arayot, of forbidden relationships, that is midoraita, including eshet ish. The gzeira they made at that time is they extended it even to pnuya, single unmarried girls. Now, there was another son of Dovid that tried to rebel against him, his name was Adoniya, Adoniya ben Chagit. And the psukim say, other than Avshalom, Adoniya ben Chagit mitnaseh lemor ani emloch. So he took position of authority, mitnaseh, elevated himself, saying, I will be the king. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, melamed shebikesh loholmo v'lo holmato. Very interesting Rashi here. Apparently the crown of David HaMelech had a certain bar that went across the walls of the crown, and only one that was worthy of malchut would it fit properly on their head. The way Rashi explains it, it sounds like those who were worthy of malchut had some sort of an indentation in their head, and the crown would fit. So this Adoniya attempted to put it on his head, and he didn't have that indentation, so it didn't fit on his head because he wasn't roi for malchut. The psukim say, again, there in Malachim Aleph, Vayas lo rechev u'parashim v'chamishim ish ratzim lefanav. It says he made for himself a chariot and footsmen, and 50 people were running in front of him. Now, the 50 people running in front of him, there's some significance to this. What is the significance of these 50 people? Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, kulan netulei techol v'chakuke kapot raglayim hayu. These were 50 people that had their spleens removed or destroyed, and also the bottoms of their feet had been carved out. So Rashi explains the spleens secrete some sort of a liquid or some sort of an enzyme possibly that causes people to become tired. So these, you call them super soldiers, would take some sort of a chemical that would destroy their spleen, preventing them from tiring. And also they'd carve out the nerves from the bottom of their feet so they could run over thorns and thistles and they wouldn't be tired, they'd be able to continue. These were the 50 footsmen that were running in front of him to coronate him. Ultimately, his attempt to take the throne from Shlomo, who was fitting, was thwarted, but that's the end of that story. We'll stop here at the Mishnah, towards the top of Chaf Aleph Amud Bet. In the meantime, everybody have a wonderful day, Shabbat Shalom, and Purim Sameach. All the best.